Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Dyslexic Reading. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit different and really fun actually. I got a comment on one of my last videos asking me to do a rundown of books that I lowly rated or thought were really overhyped, and I thought that was such a great idea, so thank you so much. And if you do have any ideas for me, please comment them down below. I love hearing your ideas and thoughts about things. Please overload me with them. I'd love that so much. So I'm going to run you guys through my most lowly rated and books I think are really overhyped and don't get the hype around. This is just my opinion. Again, there's no hate towards these, or if you really love them, like, again, just my opinion. It means nothing in the long run, but if you're interested in it, I'd love to share it. So a lot of these books I've read within the last year, in 2024 specifically, or 2023. I haven't encountered one in 2025 yet that I've rated super lowly, but then again, I am like reading my third book of the year. I'm a slow reader. So with that in mind, there's no specific publication year I'm looking at here. It's just overall anything in or before 2024. A lot of these I've seen in different suggestions of different videos, and I've kind of picked up thinking, oh, this is great, this is going to be amazing, and it just didn't hit the mark for me, which again isn't like a slight to the booktubers who recommended them to me, or booktalkers or bookstagrammers. It's just, again, my opinion. It didn't hit for me personally. It didn't do anything for me, but a lot of the books have really promising qualities going for them. So, you know, you might love it, you might love these books, but it just didn't do anything for me personally. It's kind of like, I guess, how people can either really love Marmite or really hate it, or where you have the gene that makes coriander taste amazing, or like soap. I have the one that makes it taste like soap. It's just like that, you know, interchangeable for each person. But with that in mind, let's get into some of my most lowly rated or overhyped books. So the first book I'm going to start off with is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I picked this book up after looking at horror recommendations in the back end of last year, around October, and I had really high hopes. I had read My Heart is a Chainsaw, which I really loved. It was an homage to horror. It was great. I rated it about a 3.5 star, nearly 4 star. But this book just didn't hit as well for me. I absolutely adored the representation of Native Americans in this book. I love it when I read about a character that may not get brought up in other books. I find that with a lot of books, the characters are predominantly white, blonde females, blue eyes, or maybe brown eyes and brown hair, and they always have to be tiny and petite, and there's not a lot of variation in that. So to pick up a book where the main characters are all Native American men or women essentially was really refreshing. It was so refreshing. And if you have any recommendations for me to try where the characters aren't all white and blonde and small, then please send them my way. I need variation in my life. But anyway, run over. This book follows a group of young Native American boys as they go hunting, but they decide to go into the elders restricted section and hunt a lot of elk in there. And because of this, an entity follows them around for the rest of their lives, slowly picking them off one by one. I had extremely high hopes for this book. As I said, you know, the plot sounds great. This unseen entity in Native American culture is so interesting to me, especially because I love history and archaeology. But it felt so rushed. There is so much more detail that this could have gone into, and it isn't even like it was a lack of pages. It just felt that the information on half of these pages was absolutely pointless. It added nothing to the plot, added nothing to the characters, and it felt almost a bit lazy, like Stephen Graham Jones was trying to get up to a certain word count. I was told through Book Talk that this book would be really spooky and it would spook me a lot. But was I spooked? No, I wasn't spooked, not at all. It didn't spook me in the slightest, and that's really weird because I do have a fear of skinwalkers. If you know, you know. The Appalachian Mountains on TikTok scares the crap out of me. But even though this was like a skinwalker type entity, it just didn't scare me, not at all. And I think that's a reflection of the way that Stephen Graham Jones actually writes his plots and characters. I don't think Stephen Graham Jones, in my personal experience, can write a really suspenseful plot. Again, that is just my opinion. That is no hate to anybody at all. No hate to Stephen Graham Jones, but I don't think he excels in writing really atmospheric and spooky plot lines. I think he excels in joking and making it fun and light-hearted in a way, like he did in My Heart is a Chainsaw, which worked for that but did not work at all for this book. So when he did try and write a suspenseful atmosphere, it just didn't work. It fell flat for me. The actual content of the book at times was really engaging. Like, there was a great scene with one of the second incidences, which I really enjoyed. It was very visual, you could visualize it in your mind, and I thought it was just very unique. However, a lot of the scenes in this book felt really long-winded and really pointless, as I kind of pointed out before, saying that a lot of it felt like it shouldn't have been in there and he was trying to reach a word limit. I just really doubled down on that. I don't know why. It just really gave the vibe that he was rushing and didn't think out the plot, and it wasn't as flashed as it could have been if he gave it a couple months to marinate in his brain and come out with some good options. I originally rated this book 2 stars. Again, it was okay, it just didn't hit well for me, and I think this could be a really good book for somebody who has more of an attention span than I do. But I prefer my horror and thriller books to be a lot more confrontational, a lot more spooky and atmospheric. That's why I really love ghost stories, because it's so unknown. The spiritual aspect of the entity / skinwalker, it could have been a great book for me. It just fell a bit flat for me in general. With that in mind, let's move on to the second book in this countdown, which is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I really love Riley Sager as a thriller author. I know he isn't everybody's top pick, but I really loved The Only One Left. I thought it had a great, spooky, atmospheric plotline where I could picture the whole scene set. Either one. I could picture it so well, and I could picture the characters and how flawed they were, and it kept me on the edge of my seat. I also really liked Home Before Dark. Again, really atmospheric and a bit spooky. Lock Every Door fell a little bit off for me. This book is essentially a flat sit gone wrong. It's this really affluential and old building where the protagonist really loves and has always admired it, and she finally gets to do a apartment or flat sit, but something feels really off in there, especially with the residents. There's also a bunch of rules that she has to follow, which really don't hit well for her. And when she discovers the remnants of the last flat sitter, she really starts to investigate what is happening here. I found the book to be a little bit boring. Not in the sense that nothing happened all the way through, because things did happen, but it felt so predictable and overdone. I feel like I've seen the trope of, oh, this really okay thing, but something's gone wrong all the time. And I'd love just one book to surprise me, to use that trope, but throw a twist in that absolutely takes me out. And that, I feel like, is an unrealistic thing to say. However, a girl can dream. The twist didn't make too much sense for me, but I do enjoy twists where you have hints throughout all of the book, and then at the end you're like, click, it makes sense. But with this, I felt like with the twist, it didn't make sense to me in my head, and I didn't predict it. That's why. I read this at the first part of 2024 when I really discovered Riley Sager through TikTok. I was heavily encouraged to read this book, but again, just didn't add up for me. I rated it 2 stars in the end. It was not as good as Riley Sager's other works. I could heavily recommend to you a lot better books by this author, except for this one. It wasn't awful, but it didn't wow me in the slightest, and I don't think I'd recommend it to a friend because I feel like it may waste their time, if that wasn't too harsh. So I'm going to talk about this next book, but I don't have the physical copy, so I'll insert a picture. It is called In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. I picked it up for about $2.50, so I wasn't essentially expecting great things, and I was right. It was probably one of the worst books I've ever read. In my personal taste, it is not something I enjoyed at all. It follows the plotline of a bridal party or a hen do going a little bit lopsided when the bride's best friend acts a little bit strange. I didn't find the book predictable as much as I found it frustrating. I felt like it was going to go down a very specific path, and that's completely fine, but it didn't execute the plot very well. I feel like it failed to create a really creepy atmosphere that it wanted to do. Like, through the activities on the hen weekend, it's supposed to build up this tension and build up this anticipation of something really bad's going to happen. But for me, it fell a little bit flat and just felt like, oh, well, what are you going to do? The ending felt very rushed as well. It didn't feel like something that was planned for a long time and then put together beautifully. It felt like something that was planned over a short period of time and then crammed in to basically make a book. I just really didn't enjoy it. I don't think there was a single point when reading that book that I thought, oh, this is great, I'm really enjoying this, I want to pick it back up. I read it within a day so I could get it over with, because at that point I was really scared to DNF books for some reason. I don't know why, I really don't. But if I read it now, I think I'd DNF it after page 20. I am not personally a big fan of the author Ruth Ware, just because I have never read a book from them that I really enjoyed. That is not a reflection on them at all, it's more of a reflection on me and my tastes. I need something that's fast paced and keeps going and keeps me intrigued because of my dyslexia, so it doesn't trick my eyes. It encourages me to keep reading rather than something where it's really slow and not much is happening and I can't follow easily. Like I said with Riley Sager, I am not a great fan of this trope of, oh, this really simple and mundane thing, but it goes wrong. I feel like it's a reflection on the thriller and horror genres that we have, and saying that it's oversaturated isn't the right word, but saying that thrillers and horrors have the same plots that go all the way through them is something that's really reflected within those two books in general. I think if the trope is employed in a great way, then that's a great book. But a lot of the times they fall really flat because they fail to create this suspenseful atmosphere that the viewer really needs to feel involved and invested in the characters' books and root for the main character to get out of these situations. So moving on to the next book, I once again don't have this in a physical copy, so I'm just going to insert a picture. It's The Silent Bride. I rated this book a 1 star because once again, I really didn't enjoy it. The plot idea in general was really interesting. It is a bride who does not recognize her husband or his family at the altar, and essentially she freaks out and calls off the wedding, and it follows her from there. It's really interesting. It is a super interesting thriller premise. I really look forward to this. This was hyped on BookTok as a really good thriller that could really get you into the genre more, really get you out of a reading slump. I read it and I wanted to go back into my reading slump. I think there are a lot of problems within the plot that weren't worked out by the author of the book before they were written. Like, not recognizing somebody's face at the altar can mean a complete different array of things that were all really interesting to delve into. The main drive forward for the plot was her thinking, oh, is there something wrong with me or is there something wrong with him? And the main character was kind of treated like there was something wrong with her the entire time and she had some kind of brain abnormality. But nobody suspected that there was anything wrong with him until a lot further into the book, which really annoyed me, because if one of your best friends told you that that was not the man that she'd met or wanted to marry, you'd be like, something wrong with him, not something wrong with you. I just feel like this main character had no real friends, and that really annoyed me. Like, no realistic friend would just assume that she had a medical abnormality with her brain. What? I also found the ending really annoying. It was a really poor ending, poorly thought out. Didn't make a lot of sense to me at all. It felt like it was thought about in the middle of the book while the author was writing and then was just put down. And it felt like the author was meant to change the rest of the book to fit that ending, but just didn't bother, or maybe ran out of time. I don't know. This is just my opinion. I'm going to emphasize that all the way through this video. This is just my opinion. This is no hate on any authors. Just that book. For me, it just fell so flat for me. And I was so disappointed, and it did actually affect my view on that BookToker, which sounds really bad, but I feel a lot of books that they've recommended to me have not been amazing or up to any kind of standard, and they're just reading these tiny throwaway thrillers so they can get their book count up and sound more impressive as their following grows. As well, with the ending, it was set up for a potential sequel, but I think nobody in their right mind would sign up for that sequel, because what would happen? Nothing would happen. It wouldn't. If you've read it, then you kind of know what I'm on about. It could go through a different avenue with thriller genre, but also I don't think it would benefit, and I don't think a lot of people want to pick that up. I got it on Kindle Unlimited, fortunately, so I didn't actually pay anything for it. Because if I actually paid money for that, I'd be really mad afterwards. Like I was with In the Dark Wood. I paid £2.50 of my good money for that. Nothing. Okay, girl, give us nothing. Just my opinion. Anyway, I'm gonna stop saying that I don't have the physical copy with me and just insert the picture of the next book I'm gonna talk about, because I feel like we'll be here all day if I keep giving that disclaimer. So the next book I'm gonna talk about is Tender is the Flesh. It's really hard for me, this one, because it is so well loved and has a really big cult following on TikTok, Bookstagram, Booktube, everywhere. It is commended as one of the best dystopian horror or thriller books, and I just didn't get why it was overhyped. If you haven't heard of this book, basically it follows a dystopian world where meat has been contaminated, so now humans are eating humans, and there's a whole human meat trade like we have with cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, and they go through slaughterhouses. Some humans are raised to be slaughtered, others are just butchers and living in normal lives. Did I feel like this book was a piece of vegetarian and vegan propaganda? Yes. Did it make me feel a bit sick and go off meat? A little bit. Like a tad, but I still ate my chicken nuggets. I'm not gonna lie to any of you. It was a bit impactful. It impacted me a little bit, but I still ate those chicken nuggets like a champ. Nobody was gonna stop me. If you're vegetarian or vegan, that is great for you. Many times I've thought about becoming vegetarian or vegan because I love animals quite a bit, but I've never had the willpower to go through with it. So props on you guys. Strongest soldiers. However, for people like me who enjoy chicken nuggets way too much for that, and are not as willpowered as you guys are, I just felt like this book was a piece of propaganda to make people stop eating meat. Yeah, it's one of those books where I felt really disappointed that I didn't like, and it isn't even a reflection on the writer. The writer wrote a really interesting plot with really dislikable characters to make you feel that little bit more uneasy and sick, and this really weird relationship between all the characters that felt really off, and like, okay, what the heck is going on here? The atmosphere was really chilling. You always felt physically sick while reading, or at least I felt physically sick while reading. It was more of psychological horror with bits of kind of little scraps of body horror, I'd say. So definitely check trigger warnings before you read that book. It is quite a lot to handle, but it just fell flat for me. I don't think I was its intended audience. A lot of people say that it's really impactful and really changed their perspective on the meat trade and really haunted them for a while. It just didn't hit the mark with me again. I did read it and it was a very short and snappy read, but I think if I was to read it now, I'd DNF it. I just didn't enjoy it. Would I see much point in keep reading a book I don't enjoy now? No, not really. It feels like it's wasting my time. But back then, I was built different. I just really had to read those books I didn't enjoy. I think though the exploration of a society without meat is a really, really interesting thing to think about. Like, it wasn't really explained how humans just decided to start eating other humans and put them in a whole trade. But, you know, they're doing them. It's an interesting process. It is interesting. I would recommend you to read it if you're that way inclined, or maybe you just want something that's a little bit more left field. But I think it's overhyped, definitely, at least in my opinion. I think the 1 star feels pretty harsh. I think I'd rate it 2 stars at best. But then again, I'm very in between. So maybe 1.5 star. let's go with that. Okay, let's go with 1.5 star for Tender is the Flesh. Okay, for this book, I actually have the physical copy. Shock. So unfortunately, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I am a straight up hater of this book. Straight up hater. I hate this book. Hate it so much. I bought this book when I was getting into reading fully, and it was recommended as you can't put it down, you'll get so invested, you'll love it so much. And I bought it and I just didn't like it at all. It made me feel very gross. I even give it to my mum because she wanted to read it because people at her work were talking about it, and I said to her, Mum, it's really bad, you won't like it. And she was like, oh well, I'll try it anyway. Hated it. She found it boring, didn't like it. And yeah, so if you don't trust me, trust my mum. My mum has great taste in books as well, just side note. So It Ends With Us is by Colleen Hoover. I rated this, I'm checking my rating for accuracy, 1 star. I think if I could have rated it 0 stars, I would have rated it 0 stars. This was the most capitalistic money grab representation of domestic violence and SA. I have really angry and frustrated feelings towards this author. They've had a lot of controversy around them, and if you don't know about it, maybe go and research that. It's not something that I particularly want to discuss on here in full detail. It's not very nice. I think somebody who romanticizes domestic abuse and sexual assault with such chest to young girls who read their books needs some kind of punishment, needs some kind of penalty. I found it so gut-wrenching, especially to think about these 16-year-old girls, 17-year-old girls with not much relationship experience thinking that this is somewhat normal, or normalizing these abusive microaggressions towards women or other people, isolating themselves off, being protective. These are qualities, or being overprotective, sorry. These are qualities of an abuser that were greatly normalized within this book until it was way too late. And I know that with domestic abuse, a lot of times you only notice these patterns until it's way too late in and you're in too deep. However, no, this book took it to a new level of capitalization from using these really intense and dark themes as a way to further their own story. I have such issue with authors using these really traumatic themes as a way to further their own plot lines or make their characters more interesting. There is no need to romanticize or push something that has been so traumatic in one person's life without a trigger warning or anything like that, which we see in a lot of things like Game of Thrones. We also see these really needless violence in Stephen King as well towards women and young girls. I think it says a lot about an author to use that kind of situation as a writing device. It's a different thing if the author treats this issue with respect and uses it to gain attention to these issues and really advocating for a better future, but to use these in these kind of writing device ways and introduce these feelings and experiences of other women and people to just a writing device, it disgusts me and I can't get behind that. So if you haven't heard of the plot with this book, it follows Lily Bloom, who is a florist who is in an abusive relationship, and her struggle to kind of come to terms with that and get out with that and try and further herself, I guess. I wouldn't give this book a second thought about throwing it out the window. I've many times thought about donating it to a charity shop, but I don't think I'd ever want to recommend or give somebody the opportunity to read this from me myself. I've thought about destroying it. I've thought about all sorts with this book, and I generally don't know what to do with it. Whenever I look at it, it makes me feel really not great and angry, so I hide it on my bookshelf behind other books. And I think that says a lot. This is the most... I cannot unrecommend this to you enough. I'm really sorry for that rant. It was really intense for both of us, I know, but If I could, I would, but I'm not physically strong enough to rip that binding. 0 stars if I could, but no. 1 star, I guess. A criticism my mum had about this, though, she found it really boring. Like, my mum DNF'd this book. She found up to where she read incredibly boring. The writing was really bad. It felt really slow paced. You may love this book. You may have read this book before Colleen Hoover had all of her controversies come out and thought, wow, this is amazing. And that's completely fine. And please, like, don't feel offended because of my rant or my really, really strong review, but also, no. For this next book, on a lighter note, I really loved this series. That is no joke. And I found it really hard to confront a book in that series that felt a little bit off kilter to me, which is A Court of Starlight and Frost by Sarah J. Maas. I love ACOTAR. I am an ACOTAR girly through and through. Do I support Sarah J. Maas as an author with all the controversies that have come out? No, not at all. But ACOTAR and Throne of Glass and Crescent City, I'd forever recommend those series. I really, really love them. So A Court of Frost and Starlight just felt, it didn't hit. To be completely honest with you guys, it felt like a capitalistic money grab. It felt like it was completely unneeded, and it's 233 pages long. If you've read any Sarah J. Maas, you kind of will understand that that is literally nothing to her. This girlie has written a 900-page book. 900 pages. So 233 is nothing, which makes me feel more and more like this is just a money grab. It is like a Christmas filler episode of one of your favourite shows where you're like, oh, nothing really happened there. Would I watch that again if it wasn't Christmas? No, I wouldn't. Which is exactly the feel with this book. Would I read it again if it wasn't Christmas? No. Would I read it at Christmas? Didn't this year or the year before, so probably not. It didn't add anything to the actual series itself, except maybe set up more of a Nesta orientated plotline for Silver Flames, which is the book after this. Except for that, it just made me dislike a lot of the main characters a little bit more, especially Cassian. But I don't hate Cassian, don't get me wrong, it just made me dislike him in this moment. I don't like Mor though. I'm a Mor denier. It made me hate Mor even more. Ooh. It made me hate Mor even more. Truth teller, no. Where's the truth, Mor? Where? Sorry, this video is getting really heated. I didn't mean it to get this heated. It's just getting that. It's just getting that vibe. Anyway, I rated this 2 stars. I just found it meh. It wasn't super bad. It wasn't good. Didn't add anything. I feel like you could just read the whole ACOTAR series but leave out this book. I'm not gonna lie. It didn't give me anything. Okay, give me nothing once again. But if you really did like this book, that's really cool. It does feel festive, so if you need a Christmas read, then maybe this would be cool. But I'd heavily recommend, if you wanted a Christmas read, sorry, off tangent, off topic. If you wanted a Christmas read, read Spectacular by Stephanie Garber and read the Caraval series. I think you'd really enjoy it. I enjoyed it, so maybe you would enjoy it. Moving on to our final book in this very, very ranty video and very intense video. It is I Let You Go. I wish I let this go. It was meh. It was meh. I read this in the summer of 2024 and I rated it 2 stars. I listened to it on audiobook as well as actually reading it physically, and it just didn't hit anything for me. I feel like this whole book could have been avoided with good communication, or at least some communication between characters. This book follows Jenna, our main character, who goes through a traumatic event, so to avoid this, moves to Wales. And then we kind of follow Jenna through all of that and what happens and how it could follow her in the police investigation as well. I enjoyed the dual point of views from the police to Jenna, But what I didn't enjoy was how avoidable this all could have been. How avoidable. However, this does have a much better representation of domestic abuse than It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I feel, oh my god, that was nearly an accident. The domestic abuse in this book is portrayed as very horrible, and this is a very horrible thing that happens sometimes, unfortunately, and how one should get out of it. And it does raise the issue of domestic abuse and sexual assault and really talks about those and gets into it and how heinous these crimes are. I enjoyed that about this book, how it faced these uncomfortable topics and advocated for a better future. But what I didn't enjoy was the plot in general. The twist was really good in this book, do not get me wrong, and this could have been a good 3.5 star maybe for me. Maybe even like a 4 star. But I just felt the characters were really ill-explored except for the main character herself. I didn't have any emotional attachment to any other character apart from the main character, and I felt like understanding her character relations and kind of rooting for her was a lot harder with that. You have a lot of empathy for the main character, but outside the empathy you don't have a lot of feeling towards her at all, so it felt really disconnecting from the book in general. Again, I was recommended this book by the same BookToker who recommended The Silent Bride quite heavily in their videos, and it again just really did not hit well for me. I paid £9 for this book, and it's not something I'd pay again for something like it. The only reason I didn't DNF this was because I had a lot of hope that it would get a lot better, and it did. It got better with the twist, but it just wasn't enough to bring it up to a higher rating for me at least, or get more involved or feel impacted by the story. Because of that, I gave it a 2 star. Anyway, thank you for going through this very frustrated, ranty video with me today. It's been really nice. Thank you so much for watching this far in, if you've made it this far in and putting up with all of that. These again, just my opinions, big disclaimer. If you really enjoyed these books or having a different opinion from me, that's completely fine, that's your opinion. These are just my opinions, and personally I would not recommend these to anybody. And my ratings of these have changed from the original, especially A Court of Frost and Starlight. I originally rated that book a lot higher, but through time I've kind of realised that it was just because I like the other books, not that book in general. So I have changed the ratings of some of them upon reconsideration, and that's completely fine too. If you're ever in that position, it's completely fine to change your ratings and change your opinion. It's your opinion. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video and would like to stick around for the next, thank you so much. Please consider subscribing and giving the video a like. You can even comment some of your favourite books that I could maybe read, or some ideas that you'd want me to do for another video. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram at the same @dyslexic reading, and I post on there quite regularly. I post dyslexic friendly recommendations, and I also post different fun book content things. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I have some other videos if you'd like to watch those, but if not, I'll see you in the next one.